Okay, we might make a start. So thank you to those that have come along to our next CLF or Concussion Legacy Australia webinar. There's certainly a lot been happening with CLF of late. We've had some amazing experiences with a walk over in Sydney with the NRL team, the Bulldogs. We recently had a fantastic corporate lunch in Melbourne with Paddy McCartan and Nathan Murphy talking about their experiences with concussion and retirement. So it's certainly been a really exciting period, and we're really excited tonight to have three amazing guests, all from different aspects of the area of brain injury and sport. So really privileged to have these three guests here tonight. And what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce them, ask a couple of questions, and then open it up to people here tonight if they want to have or if they have any questions or they want to ask for any feedback or comments. We have three amazing panelists here. Just a reminder that the Concussion Legacy Foundation, we are here to look at support mechanisms so we can help people who have perhaps been suffering from a brain-related injury due to sport. We offer that through things like webinars. We have a helpline. We also have Zoom support meetings where, and I know Trent has been really active in that space, helping those that might want to have a talk about what's happening in their life. We also now have education, and we're in the process of rolling out an education program in Sydney. So we've Dr. Alan Pearce has produced the materials, and we'll be heading over to Sydney to conduct that brain health program for schools. This is targeted at young people, not about scaring them about sport, but preparing them for how they can protect their brain in sport, and also shifting the culture where young people can support each other in the event of concussion rather than encourage them to stay on the field. So that's where we're at the moment. But tonight we have this webinar, and I'd like to introduce our three amazing guests. So I'll start with Sue Trudgett. Thank you, Sue. Sue has been a member of our foundation since its inception. She's been an integral part of our team. Sue is the wife of Bruce Trudgett, who played for the Penrith Panthers for some time and did suffer quite a lot of concussions in his day, and at the moment is suffering from sort of early onset Alzheimer's as well as suspected CTE. So welcome, Sue, for you to come tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. Yep. And good evening, everyone. It's good to be here. I just want to give a little bit about my story because I think that no matter what type of brain injury you suffer, there always seems to be support needed. So mine is as a result of being the wife of a footballer who has suffered many concussions from about age 18 when he was selected in a representative team and knocked out and depressed fracture of the skull. And that was where it kind of all started. And then there were many, many more concussions along the way at different teams, and many Sunday nights spent in emergency where they would have a look at him and say, well, just keep an eye on it, go back to work tomorrow, training Tuesday night, and you'll be off again. We all know that that's not the best way to treat it now, but that was what happened in the day. And clearly he had a very, very high intensity job. He was a computer programmer, analyst, and wrote his own software, ran his own company. So he probably had the worst kind of job to go back into. And hence we are all now sort of supporting him through early onset Alzheimer's, which was diagnosed at age 65, but we think it was probably there for much longer than that. Diagnosis was a nightmare. Like
I can imagine.
Everybody's story. There were, many suggestions that this couldn't be. There's nothing wrong with it. But clearly we had to keep going because we knew there was, and trying to navigate your way through that is really, really difficult. And that's what I'd say to people: don't give up. The GP is always your first port of call, but generally speaking, in our experience, they don't tend to have a lot of knowledge, or they didn't then, about what you were talking about and where to send you next. And it really wasn't until I had a friend whose daughter was studying a PhD in dementia, and she knew some of the challenges we were facing. And she said to me, "You need to get into a neurologist, and you need to do it straight away." The neurologist took maybe 30 minutes, 60 minutes, number of tests. And then he said, "Well, I'm almost 100% sure you've got early onset Alzheimer's," but then had volumetric MRI. So that being said, it's knocks you for six, like everybody can imagine. It happened.
I can imagine, Sue, you know, being sort of the partner of someone, the care that you have to provide, it's a big commitment, and also, you know, a difficult one as well, to watch your husband, who was, you know, quite active, had his own business, to become someone who needs to rely on, you know, a lot of assistance and support.
And that's what I think, people sometimes don't understand, is you are actually grieving the whole time, because you're losing somebody while you're actually watching them. And it can become quite a lonely kind of area, because you don't have a partner to bounce things off again. And while I'm not complaining, because this happened at a later stage in his life, I thought there must be something that we can do to actually not get to this stage. And then when I learned more about CTE and the brain bank, and I thought, well, this is the way to go. When I approached the National Rugby League, they said, "Oh, we've got a long-term study. We'll know in 20 years what happens." I said, "You know now what happens. We just, now what support are you going to offer for these ex-players?" And the answer back then was nothing. It's getting better now, but I think there's so much more to do. And if there's anything we can do to sort of help anybody with a diagnosis or with support along the journey, that's what I'm interested in.
Great, thank you very much. And I think that's why we have you here, Sue, because, you know, there are people who are affected by concussion, but there are also family members that also have to ride through this difficult journey. So thank you for being here. I'd like to introduce you now to a very different story. Trent Keep was actually a cricket player who retired at 29. He also played some AFL. Born in Tassie, but now lives up on the Gold Coast and works for Cricket Queensland, I believe. But was a very good cricketer, winning the 2019 Emerson Rodwell Medal, which is basically the Tasmanian Best and Fairest, I understand. But unfortunately, you had to end your career early due to concussion. So, Trent, over to you. Just want to share a little bit of your story.
Yeah, thanks, Anita. I was probably going to get dropped soon anyway, so the concussion probably got there first. So it's a bit cooler story, but no, it's been a difficult period of time. I think I'm up to about 14 incidents now resulting in concussion, and at least half of those I've spent a considerable amount of time obviously in rehab and in hospital. So still ongoing, to the point where, for everyone who wasn't here earlier, we spoke today, a regular routine checkup with a neurologist here on the Gold Coast, and kind of got a response that, to Sue's point, wasn't what I thought was probably correct, in terms of we can't really do much about the path you're going down. So I think that, again, to Sue's point, it's just that you just have to keep asking for the answers and keep searching to someone to help. And without the foundation, and I just stumbled across Lydia, who also does some work with us, who can't be here tonight, and probably kept me going where it was getting to a difficult time. And every time I go back to Tasmania and speak to my family, mum and dad, and we probably reflect on how difficult it's been for them to sort of sit from afar and watch their son go through that, and the changes with not much knowledge around head knocks and concussion and stuff. And my dad is obviously 56. He played in an era of AFL football where it wasn't really discussed, and we're just kind of transitioning now into the back end of what that's going to look like as I sit here at 30. But very, very blessed to be part of the organisation, to be surrounded with Anita and Wendy and people, Sue as well. So yeah, very grateful, as much as it's been a bit of a challenging period. Similar to everyone that's here, just want to try and share my story to provide a little bit of light in that there is actually assistance there.
Great, thanks, Trent. And I know that you were hit by a cricket ball. Is that right as well?
Yeah. So two of them, one of them was in the nets. I was batting, and then another was just at training, was walking out of the net. So I don't know if I've got any cricketers on the line, but 4 nets in a row like that. I'm in net 1, someone from net 2 hit the ball, and I just finished my net session in net 1. So I was working, wasn't really facing it, 1 in a million chance. So I think it was fate for me to go through a little bit of this, and perhaps to share my story. But yeah, there's some days where I probably wish I had to face one more ball longer in the nets and not been in that position, but it is what it is.
Yeah. It is what it is, and thanks, Trent, for being here to share your unique story
No
as
worries.
well. And our third guest is Wendy Smith, and you can see that everyone's got their happy lids hats on. So Wendy, your story is again very different and very difficult, I think. So Wendy lost her son Antonio just last year playing an AFL game due to a collision, and actually passed on the field, close to where the field was. So Wendy, please share with us some insights for what your views are on concussion, and maybe share a little bit about your story and how do you cope? Yeah, so.
Thanks, Anita. Being part of the foundation gives me a lot of strength. So I advocate, just for concussion awareness and second impact syndrome. But I'll just share some background with my son, Antonio. He was 20 and he was fairly fortunate throughout most of his life, didn't really get concussions until he hit his teens. And then in 2017, he received a pretty bad concussion where his vision was impaired, got really bad headaches, just wanted to stay in bed, and mood swings, all that sort of thing. And we ended up getting him checked out by a neuro surgeon. And as it turned out, he was diagnosed with benign intracranial hypertension, which is essentially pressure on the brain. And so he needed that pressure released. And so every 6 weeks he had to have a lumbar punch. And that went on for about a year and a half. And he had about 10, 11 of these. And obviously he didn't play sport during this process. And he was a mad lover of all sports. It wasn't just football. He was in the development squad for squash, and was a long distance runner and basketball. So there was a number of sports that he was really active with. And then he didn't go back to footy after he was cleared by his neurosurgeon. And so he just took time off for a few years, concentrated on work. And then he joined a country footy club because he was working in South Australia's Riverland. And he was playing B grade, and there was a game where he got a concussion in the first quarter. They sat him out in the second, and they put him back on for the third and fourth because it was in the semi-finals. And then obviously moved back to Adelaide last year, and round one of the footy season, first quarter, received a malicious hit under the chin, and then they didn't take him off to be assessed. Continued playing on, and it was the third quarter. He was going in for the ball, and an opposition player each side, he received another high hit which pushed him into another player, and his head connected with that player's hip. So it's a real tragedy. I was there, and it was a number of errors that day. So now I advocate, especially with the grassroots footy, because I think we still need to change a lot of the concussion culture. There's a lot of mums and dads that still think, oh, it's a head knock, but I'm advocating that I just hope coaches and parents and trainers will look at a brain injury just as important as they do as an ACL or a hamstring, because it is a serious thing. So it's important, if you do see a coach or someone allowing your child to play on, don't be afraid to speak up and say no. I think you should take that kid off. because yeah, it's all those after effects, and it can be a few days before you start to feel symptoms as well. So I say that through my own experience with my son Antonio and my younger son Jack, who's had a couple of concussions when he was playing footy. So yeah, really important to understand also second impacts, because if you don't rest and recover and sit out, your brain's at high risk of re-injury, and that's when you can, you know, receive some serious damage. So yeah, and the Happy Lids was my son's design. He wanted to get some caps off the ground before he passed. Obviously, I got that off the ground a number of months after, and so with most of the proceeds, they're donated back to the foundation to you know, help with further research and education into brain injury and concussions and CTE.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the Happy Lids is a great initiative because it is a hat, it is on the head. And I know it's something that he had a vision for the future. So it's a beautiful way to acknowledge Antonio. And I think we're really grateful for the support that you do give us there. And I think, like, I mean, the messages that I'm getting from this, Wendy, is, you know, if someone is concussed in a football match, we know at professional levels they're monitored and they're coming off, but they're not at grassroots level. And the message is get them off the ground. And I guess the other message I get here is just the medical profession. And, you know, again, talking to Trent about your experience with a neurologist, and here we have a neurologist who has, you know, kind of approved Antonio to play. And maybe there's something where we need to look at that in light of what education can we give the medical profession around this, because it is quite a serious affair, as your story has said, that you've shared. So thank you very much. But I'd just like to ask you maybe just one or two quick questions, and then I'll go to the floor of people who might have some questions or even comments that they might want to share. First of all, you know, what are some tips on how you all cope in relation to your situation? So I'll start with you, Sue. What are some of the things that you do to remain committed, sane? You know, what are some of the tips for people that are listening? Perhaps they might be in a similar circumstance. What is some advice that you could perhaps give them that might help them in some ways with this situation?
Yeah, certainly. I think in the beginning it was educate myself about what Bruce was going through and was going to go through. So that's when I tapped into the University of Tasmania to the course on dementia down there through the MOOC. Yeah, so that was really useful, very confronting, but it was important that I could actually understand, and some of the knowledge in that was simulating how they feel when they're in that situation, so I could then understand and have patience. Although patience is something that I find I run out of every now and again. The next thing I do now, which I didn't want to take up in the beginning, was I have respite. I get respite for Bruce every so often, so that I can go away and recharge my batteries, because it is, you are truly on 24/7. You know, it's just that you're getting repeatedly asked the same things. You've got to think for two the whole time. And so the only way to actually completely recharge is to actually remove yourself and have a complete break. And that's something that I resisted for a long time. But so those couple of things are really good. The other thing I do, which, you know, I'm passionate about, I go and have Bowen therapy every 6 to 8 weeks, because it resets my nervous system, and it works hard. My nervous system works awfully hard, particularly when you start to have falls and hospitalizations and those sorts of things.
Could you just very briefly share what Bowen therapy is for those people that may not be aware?
Just a very non-invasive manual therapy that helps reset the body. So it works on the nervous system, basically like turning your computer. turning the computer off and on, and you restart it. And when you restart your nervous system, it can regulate. And all it is regulating your system to work efficiently.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think I know you've been doing a lot of study in this space, and certainly it seems to be getting some progress, which is great. And I think if anyone is interested, I'm sure Sue would love to hear from you. I know that there's Bowen therapy all around Australia, so there could be an opportunity for you to be part of that as well. So
There's a Bowen.org is where you will find the concussion page.
This is my brother, by the way.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is a concussion page, bowen.org.au, and then you can go on, scroll, go to the drop-down menu and go to concussion, and then there's a video there that shows you the work that's happening not only in Australia but in Canada and the States. So that might be useful for some people.
I'll try and find the link and pop it in the chat as well.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, now over to Trent. Now, Trent, you know, you're young, you're active, you know, and I know that we were just talking earlier how sometimes it can be a bit of a struggle for you. So for those people out there that may be, again, in a similar circumstance, what advice can you give them? You know, how do you keep going? How do you get through the day, and what advice have you got for others?
I think the overlying emotion is that you just have to be okay with the days that are really, I shouldn't swear, but my mum would kill me, but really shit. And that's the challenge, is that I've been able to put months at a time together that I would put down as a really good day. And I almost sometimes forget that I have had such a terrific or such a horrific trauma with brain issues and injuries. And then almost instantaneously, when you get too far ahead of yourself, there's a real grounding in a day that I just struggle to even exist. And I think at the start, when that first started happening, I was really resented myself for that. Why am I still feeling this way? Or I can't believe it's been, you know, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, or whatever it's been now. I can't remember, which is quite funny considering where we are and what we're talking about. That I've got better now at accepting that my life has changed, and that's my reality, is that there's going to be times where I really do struggle. And I think the support network I've got around me in terms of my friends and family, as I've allowed them into the space of mine to understand the struggle with no shame, it's been better at them probably also being okay with saying, mate, one of my best friends always says you're doing too much, to the point where I probably snap and say, mate, it's my injury, I'll decide how much I do. But they've actually showed some real care in that. So it's really hard. So there's two parts in being okay with the days that are difficult, but also understanding that you are on your own sort of story. Where I started at resentment, and if acceptance is here, I'm probably sit somewhere more there now. But there's times where I go all the way back here, and I regret being at cricket training, or I regret going back to play. And I try and find as many ways possible to ground myself, in that I wouldn't probably have many friends on earth if I hadn't played cricket. So it's a trade-off of that really positive and that little bit of negative that's been there. So I think accepting that you are on your own story with it, as a caregiver for the person who may be suffering, or watching a loved one suffer as well. I think the sooner you can get a support network and kind of allow people in, because it is a little bit taboo, this subject still, and people are going off their assumptions that they have read online, or they assume what you might be feeling. And I've certainly done that with other people who are struggling, and I felt this way, so you may feel that way, and it's not always that clear cut.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, it's really good advice. It's like a mindset kind of skill to try and really shift the experience into something where you can make a difference, rather than remain stuck and not kind of move on. I feel like that's really important. So I mean, I think, you know, as I said, you're still very young. So, and we're really grateful that you're part of this organisation and part of our Zoom support groups, where, you know, I know we spoke to someone recently on our last Zoom support, and we're really quite helpful for that person. And I think just talking about it, like you said, talking about it, you are right, there's more to be done. there is still that stigma attached, and there's still a need for a culture shift. And that's hopefully with our education program, we can really tap into that aspect of it. And I know we're looking at youth, because that's where we feel youth and parents, teachers, because they're the groups that really can have the impact for the future. So
yeah, I agree with that, Anita. And I think for anyone who's on the call, if you can just make that first contact with the organisation, what really allowed me to accept it a bit more was not having to constantly explain to people who may not understand what you're going through. I found that really relieving here in this environment, that I don't have to explain to a Sue Trudgett that I get headaches or migraines or fatigue set on onsets quickly. I found that as much as people cared and showed interest, really exhausting selfishly to go over the same story time and time again. So if there is someone out there on the call that, if it's me or whoever it may be, I think that not having to explain yourself is rewarding as well.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wendy, you've been involved with us for some time now as well. And again, really grateful for your support. My question really to you is, advice for youth sport. What are some tips that you think, or what's some advice that you could give to the sporting organisations for youth around how we can prevent or better protect younger people's brains?
I think the key is education. I think what the foundation is doing around that is fantastic. It'd be really nice to see that flow on throughout the other states and clubs. And things.
Absolutely.
But it's not just football, it's everything. Even brain injuries can happen in domestic violence as well, and especially with young kids, they'd probably play school sport and then club sport on weekends. So then you're not going to know whether they're at school and they've had a head injury on the weekend. But with my other son, Jack, he got amnesia through concussion, and we just said, right, no more football, and took him out. But like Trent, it turned his world upside down. And what came to that was a bit of depression, and what I've learnt through education with concussions and brain injuries is, you can go down a rabbit hole. Some kids and adults can self-medicate with alcohol or drugs and all these sorts of things. So it's really important to recognise when, if you're around a young person or even your mate who's an adult, it's okay to be vulnerable and say you're not feeling okay, particularly in men. I think the older ones have been conditioned to just cop it on the chin and soldier on, and I think that's really changed now. We just need to educate both male and female that it's okay to share your feelings when you're you're suffering from symptoms, because with concussion, one of the effects is you can just cry at a drop of a hat and not understand why you're crying. So there's, I guess, just have some self-awareness if you have some friends or children or people in your family suffering from brain injury, because they might not know how to get help, and that's where they can reach out to the foundation or their GP or a neurologist or whatever.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think really important, and it's all about that culture shift and the education program we're getting out there. And also we're trying to, everything you said was amazing, but also trying to get sports to have reduced tackling up to 14. The current research indicates that the longer or the longevity of someone playing the sport is where there's an increase of CTE. So if we can reduce the number of impacts to the brain up to 14, it actually can help a lot with lowering your risk of that CTE or chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is only caused by repetitive head knocks. So that's something there. I have got my brother here, Paul, who's come from New South Wales, and he got stuck coming here, but
Just come
yeah.
from neurologist.
Yeah, he's just come from the neurologist as well. And Paul, for those of you that don't know, did suffer a lot of head knocks during his AFL days in the 90s, and did suffer headaches and some memory loss, and now has epilepsy, which obviously is treated through medication. But you know, Paul, did you want to just say, you know, what have you done to try and help survive in this environment?
I never found out, but I was 56 that I had concussion at all, concussion knocks. I never really knew about it until I got researched or from a neurologist. I just didn't know. I didn't even know you get epilepsy from concussions, to tell you the truth. It was very rarely known until I went and I got checked in 2016, and I was very much surprised they diagnosed the epilepsy, and the neurologist even asked me, is there epilepsy in your family? I asked Mum, she goes, no. And they come back as from concussions playing AFL football, too many head concussions. They asked if I had knocks. I said, yeah, I've got stitches in my head and that, and it was just, that's what they diagnosed in the end, and it's been clarified now. So that's what it can cause, I suppose. And I played till I was 36, so you never really thought of it much then. You never come off the ground with a head knock back then, because there was no indications, you never thought of it, you just sort of didn't want to come off. There was no, you didn't think you'd harm yourself back then. It was it's more coming out future with needers that they now keep players off the ground a week later, and it's they still don't want to, people still don't want to recognise it, which is a shame. It was only going to do damage in the future as I'm a result, and it's I only found out by an accident.
Yeah, I think you know, just to share, my brother, I mean, initially the initial neurologist just thought it was epilepsy and there was no connection to his sport playing days. But unfortunately, my brother had an accident, and due to an epileptic seizure, and lost his wife during that. So it was quite a tragic event. And then he was imprisoned for manslaughter. So, but I think today's quite a significant day because his parole ends today, so he's a free man. So it's pretty, that's why he's able to come and visit me in Melbourne. So, you know, I guess, but I think that the neurologist that he goes to now, Chris Plummer in Melbourne, has been amazing, and you know, has
I got out back late tonight because we had a big discussion today. So yeah, sort of it was a bit longer there than I expected. But yeah.
So that's good. So thanks, Paul, for coming. I know we're running out of time for questions, so I'd like to now open up the floor. If anyone has any questions, thank you, Luana, for your comment. Fantastic news for Paul, and for Catherine. Anyone have any questions for any of our panelists? Something that you can pop it in the chat. Okay, Lachlan, thank you. Thanks for all your stories, Lachlan from Victoria. Wendy touched on this, but I was wondering what you can all foresee the minimum standard might be for grassroots sports regarding concussion safety. My understanding is most sports have a level 2 trained first aider at the ground, court and/or event, but that is the extent of the requirements of the club teams at this stage. So I don't know if anyone wants to comment. I can also comment. Does anyone from the panel want to speak?
I can just tell you of a really great initiative with one of the clubs here. So as you know, in adolescent clubs, they're generally volunteers. And so it's really one make sure the club checks the first aid certificates, because they run out every year. So you need to make sure that their CPR is up to date, because things change in the medical industry quite a lot. Secondly, one of the clubs here, a couple of the team managers, they came up with this app, which pretty much is just a checker with all the kids. And in the back end, it just the data just goes onto like an Excel spreadsheet. They're not very sophisticated, but what it does allow is it allows the players to be tracked of injuries. So, you know, they can then say to the parents, well, your child's had 3 concussions this year, you know, it might be worth going to your GP or something like that. So that's good. And there's also, I noticed there's things on the market where they do baseline checks as well with some of the kids. But in Adelaide, the South Australian National Football League, if they're playing state footy, I know they're quite strict. You know, they really stick to the framework of making sure the kids don't go back to play or have no symptoms for 21 days. I'm not sure what it's like interstate, but that's recently been implemented and really raising a lot of awareness.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
We're using an app that does baseline checking, and it checks balance, reaction time, memory, impulse control, and trying to test teams at the beginning of the season. And then if they do suffer a knock, you can retest immediately. It's not foolproof, but it's a medical app from the States called SWAY, S-W-A-Y. Yeah, we tested it with our practitioners by getting them to have a couple of glasses of wine each to simulate a concussion and see what the difference was.
Oh, that'd be good.
Someone had to do it.
Okay. And Trent, did you want to add anything? Or?
No, I was just gonna, as Sue was speaking then, it feels a lot more like a couple of glasses, Sue, sometimes, that's for sure. And also, that's come a long way in terms of the baseline testing, because I was playing in a professional game and didn't have a single test. That would only I was 24 at the time, so 6 years ago. So it's small wins with concussion in it, and that's come a long way to now. I think non-professional underage players maybe have a baseline testing, which would be unreal. So I just think
I think it is good. And I do know when we had our luncheon last week, you know, when Paddy McCartan was speaking, he said they all memorized the test anyway. And, you know, it wasn't a really good sort of
guilty
measurement. Yeah. And I think, you know, some of the things I was involved in a documentary, or I am involved in a documentary with a football club, and what they've done is they've tested all the players before the season starts, and then as they have concussions, they're being tested throughout the season. You know, again, that's a big exercise, but we are sort of getting better with some new technology in that space. Making in Canada, anyone who plays in contact sports, parents, coaches, kids all have to do a concussion training assessment, otherwise they can't play or they can't participate. And another idea that's come out is a concussion captain, where we have people who are dedicated to the sport to actually just look out for concussions and follow up with the clubs. Because I mean, I see it. My daughter, ironically, my daughter won the grand final on the weekend in the under-18s football. But I did see concussions in the week before, and the players were still there. So there's definitely a need for us to shift that culture. You know, and myself, I did bring it up and sort of suggested maybe that's something that we could look at.
I'd just like to say, there is living proof that that concussions in the later in your life will come back and haunt you. I am living proof that it does happen. I've been diagnosed exactly as what Lewis has got. So I've got all mine is different. Mine's on the left-hand temporal lobe. He is on the right. That's all. The only difference it is. So I don't know if you know Wally Lewis, but mine is diagnosed exactly the same as him. And it's say in the future, you don't know when you're young, you think you're invincible. It will come back and haunt you.
Yeah, it is important. To look after our health before anything. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Lachlan. He's saying thanks for the ideas. Now, Catherine, could you please share your story on how you survived in the darkest moments that you feel nothing is going to work and you're just going to fall off the bottom of a cliff. That's quite, Catherine. So, yeah, what would you like to say for this one, for Han Lin? Anyone?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, yeah, I mean, it's real as well. And I think I'm sure Wendy and Sue have had them as well. Personally, I exercised to the point where I thought that was bloody going to kill me, to be honest, as well. If it wasn't concussion, it was going to be exercise. But yeah, God, when I think about them, it's easier to look back and think they weren't that bad. But I just found the next step forward, to be honest, and a little bit of enjoyment. A lot of that was around the ocean as well. When I was living on the Gold Coast, which I still am, going back some time, if I could get to the ocean, I knew that by diving under the water, I'd feel fractionally better and a little bit more refreshed. So a bit of a cliche there, but I think it's about finding the next step forward and being able to turn to someone to speak to. And maybe that is actually through the foundation again, I think, and not having to explain yourself. But just know that in that moment, you're actually not alone in terms of there's so many people that obviously love you in your own life, but certainly the people that are here that are willing to help at any time of the day. And there's living proof on this call that those darker days will actually get a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
I agree with sorry.
Wendy, yep.
Oh, I was just going to say, like I used to go to the gym, 3-4 times a week for about 6-7 years up until my son passed. And then suddenly, obviously no motivation at all. And just, I really struggled to even go for a walk around the block. But if you can find the strength to exercise, even if it is a 5-minute walk and then you work yourself up to 10 minutes and what have you, it releases a chemical in the brain which makes you feel good. So I guess just it's hard, but small steps, and then before you know it, you've walked for half an hour or an hour and you feel good, or you might be a runner or whatever. But I guess it's just baby steps and eat healthy.
Just to break that cycle, that pattern, and just slowly build on it. Yeah, thank you, Wendy. Thanks, Trent. Sue, sorry, you were gonna.
No, I'm really just going to reiterate what everyone else has said. I find nature. I just get out. Sometimes when you just feel like you can't, you just got to make yourself, and just get out into nature. I'm a bushwalker, and just get out and walk, and hug a tree, do something. Just you almost have to convince yourself. And I have a saying, this too shall pass, and it does. But sometimes it's just heavy.
Yeah. And Paul, you're here.
Mhm.
You've had a lot as well on your plate. What would you say has helped you in the dark times?
There've been a lot of dark times. Speaking to people, been a lot of times I didn't want to be here without Maria. It's very hard. I realise you got to move on. Talking to people does help. I like me gardening, so I try to get out there and do that. Sports, I still try to do my sports. I've got the lawn bowls a little thing now, which in golf, so it's keep moving, talking to people, I imagine, is part of it. As I say, a long time now, I didn't want to be here for a long time, but I've been trying to get over this hurdle of this case, this 5 years now. I think now it's time to try and move on. I want to get more into this Concussion Foundation now, where I can move around because I'm living in New South Wales. I can come down to Victoria without asking permission now on the parole officer, so now I can come down without asking permission now, so I can do more helping Anita and the Concussion Foundation itself. So that'll give me more interest, and maybe with Maria behind me pushing me, the family help me, and friends, I think that's sort of all helps behind me, and it's still not going to be easy, but it's all there to keep your mind active. And as I was talking to Chris Plummer tonight, he said, keep moving, keep keeping your mind active, keep playing, get out there, doing what you want to do, sports. And we had a bit of a talk about this tonight. Keep your mind active, get sports, keep talking to people, keep exercising, and keep trying doing things, and that'll keep your mind working. So I do have a lot of memory loss now with me concussions, and that'll keep your mind active and keep thinking positive. And that's had a bit of talk tonight with Professor Chris Plummer about this, and it's a challenge, but I'll be trying to do that, and a lot more now to help with Anita on this foundation. I've got more time now or more freedom to move around.
Yep.
So I'll be doing that, yes.
Great. Thank you very much. No, I think everyone's given just some really great advice there. And Luana, thanks. You're all so inspiring. And
I'm not
thanks
sure
for
about that, Anita. We're all train wrecks, I think.
Well, look, I think, even just to sit here and talk about it and even, make a joke can make a huge difference. But thank you. Suzanne had a question about helmets. So, and Andrew Brown said even you, Trent. So his point there.
Thank you.
So helmets, why they're not made compulsory. Suzanne, helmets don't do anything. So helmets only protect the outer part of the skull, because when you have a knock or a head impact, your brain moves inside. It's like jelly. So helmets actually don't prevent any sort of brain injury from occurring. They only protect the outside. So I guess it's not been unrealistic. They just don't do anything. We've even had neck braces. People have brought in neck things because they've linked it to concussions being through neck. But it's just one of those things that unfortunately we can't avoid concussions, but we can minimize risk, and we can also, manage it when we know that it's happened by looking at that.
Well,
Yep.
I was going to say, Anita, just on that, if you are playing footy, it's best to get your mouth guards fitted by a dentist rather than buy them from Target or Kmart, because that, I think there's been some science around the less impact when you do have a concussion if you've got a good mouth guard.
Okay, good. Thanks for that. That's another extra tip
There
there.
is something, because I'm in New South Wales, a rugby area, which they think it's all rubbish. Still do, but they are testing some new foam concussion things. It's starting to get more up there. I only heard this last week. I don't really know all of it, but it's starting to get a bit of impact up there now. So they're not liking it. Not so much the players, but the supporters.
Okay.
So it's getting a bit of backlash up there. Yeah.
There are quite a lot of products out there, and it's hard to determine which ones are there, which ones have been evidence-based and tested, rather than the ones that are just there to kind of, say this may or may not help. But, the more innovation we have, the more ideas, if there's a way that we can prevent or minimize concussions and head impacts and brain injuries, that would be fantastic. So thank you. All right, are there any other questions? We're kind of wrapping it up now, but if there's one last question you've got, and Lachlan, so Bill, sorry. There are trials on the preventative instrumented mouth guard that monitors head impacts. Thank you, Bill. If there is, something I know with the mouth guard, that's the one that can measure any head impacts to see whether or not there has, at what level that the knock had been. And I think that's a really great tool. And I know in the documentary we're doing, Bill, that all the players are wearing those mouth guards, and we are looking at the data. So it's certainly something that we need to look at further, so we can monitor whether or not the player has had a significant head impact or not. So thank you very much. And Child in New Zealand as well. Thank you, Bill. Yes, definitely a lot of things out there, and hopefully something can come from that. Lachlan, a question has made some good roads in helmet protection and concussion. Has a lining that reduces 15 degrees of movement. So any horse riders, I recommend looking into this. Thanks, Lachlan, for sharing that. If there is something like that, and we can actually scientifically show that this is going to have make some sort of difference, I think, again, always happy to look at what these options are to reduce impact. So thank you. An equestrian, I've obviously falling off a horse. Yeah, they really need all that protection as well. Yeah, and in fact, we have a member, someone who has been in to some of our Zoom supports who's fallen off horses and has suffered concussions. And I think, as Wendy and everyone said, it's not just sport. It could be a number of other impacts. We had a story this week on the military and the blasts and how they're being impacted by concussions as well from those. So domestic violence, car accidents, there's a whole range of areas that this area can sort of relate to. So thank you. All right, we're going to probably finish up now unless there's any other burning questions. I'd like to just maybe if everyone just would like to make a final comment or statement or something to our audience who's been amazing here tonight, but just maybe over to you first, Wendy. Any final comments?
I'm just flying the flag for the young ones here, but if in doubt, sit out.
Thank you. Yep, absolutely great advice. Something we need to get that message across, and hopefully with our education program, we're going to teach youngsters to, make sure they go off the ground. I remember watching the Carlton on the AFL a few weeks ago, and Harry, who was one of the players, he got knocked, and you could clearly see that he was not with it. But his teammate picked him up and said, "Come on, get up, because we don't want you to be taken off the ground." And that's exactly the type of behavior we want to stop. We want to say, get up and get off and get yourself checked. He did miss the next week, which is probably a good outcome. But thank you. Sue?
Really, just reach out for support. People are there. And you never know in a group like this or any other place who you just might help. So be vulnerable and reach out.
Yep, thank you. Paul, any final comments?
No, I think Concussion Foundation is doing a great job, and the better we can promote it, the more it can help.
Thank you, thank you. And Trent, over to you.
Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't heavy. That's what I would leave you with.
Okay. That's a really good way to leave it, because the brain often doesn't even know that it's had a concussion. Sometimes you'll have no symptoms or the symptoms might be delayed. You might get a headache the next day. I remember my husband playing soccer. He said every time he used to header the soccer ball, he used to see stars. And at the time, it was just something that he got used to. And it's not till now that he's kind of thinking, oh, maybe there were some impacts for that. So you just don't know. You just don't know what is going to happen. And so that's a really great way to finish it. Thank you again, Andrew. Nice to see happiness in the crew this evening. Thank you for coming along, Andrew. You're always supporting. Thanks, Bill. 2 girls committed suicide. There were a snowboarder and a cyclist. Yep. It'd be interesting if they have given their brains for examination to see whether or not there is any sort of connection between their head injuries and their suicide, because as we know, CTE, particularly in younger people, has been linked to suicide. So that's something that we need to do more research on. And Han Lin, thank you very much. Good luck and good health to all. So thank you. On that note, wishing you a wonderful evening. Thank you again for coming. I think for me, this has been a wonderful webinar, and I think hopefully everyone's taken away something with them tonight. And, if you do want to learn more about our foundation, please reach out to our Concussion Foundation. You can just search it up. And obviously Happy Lids, I should have put a link in there. But what's the link?
So the website's just happylids.com.au, or on Instagram at happy_lids.
Yep, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Suzanne, for being here and for listening to our personal experiences, and thank you, Lockley. Appreciate you being here as well, and the hats do look great, and thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Anita.
Bye.
You're a
Thank you.
superstar.
Bye.
See ya.
Thank
Good to
you.
meet you.
Thank you.
Uh,
Bye.